They say motorsport careers can change in the blink of an eye, and for Daniel Ricciardo, that moment might already be here. His time at McLaren seems to be slipping away, with strong signals pointing toward Oscar Piastri stepping into his seat. Ricciardo took a bold step when he walked away from Renault ahead of the 2021 season, hoping for a fresh start, but instead, it's been a rocky ride. Even though he stood on the top step at Monza last year, that win now looks more like an exception than the start of something solid. Adjusting to McLaren's car has been a real challenge. The way their machines behave on track hasn't played to Ricciardo's strengths. When you compare him to teammate Lando Norris, the gap is hard to ignore. Norris has already collected 70 points this season and has stood out even when the car hasn't been at its best. Ricciardo, on the other hand, trails by 51 points and has often been outpaced on Saturdays. During qualifying, Norris hasn't shied away from talking about the situation either. He's tried to explain that the current car, the MCL36, is no easy drive. When asked if there was any mental strategy involved, trying to mess with Ricciardo's mindset, Norris quickly shot that down. "What mind games?" he said, actually giving him more help than usual. "We're both trying to push the team forward and compete with Alpine. All the data I see, he sees. I'm trying to support him." Despite that, things haven't improved much. Ricciardo's contract runs until the end of 2023, but the team appears ready to move on. McLaren clearly has their eye on Piastri, but Alpine is also in the picture and claims they already have a valid agreement with him. What was once a quiet decision behind closed doors has now turned into a complex situation with more questions than answers. Not many could have predicted it would unfold like this. When Ricciardo first arrived at McLaren, most chalked up his early troubles to getting used to a new setup. That seemed fair at the time. Different team, different engineering, mindset, all of that takes time. Eventually, things looked promising with that Monza win, but heading into the second season, the hope was that the learning curve had been overcome. Instead, the opposite happened. The issues not only stuck around, they got worse. Which brings us to the real question. What is it about McLaren's cars that's made life so difficult for Ricciardo these past 2 years? The regulations introduced in 2022 were meant to shake things up across the grid. And while they certainly brought changes, they didn't fix the underlying problems in McLaren's setup, especially the ones that affect drivability. The MCL36, much like the car before it, is strong through fast corners but shows weakness in medium-speed turns. James Key, McLaren's technical director, said near the end of last season that the team had tried to start fresh, to fix the flaws and make sure no lingering habits carried over into the new design. But that reset didn't seem to change much. Both drivers, Norris and Ricciardo, felt the same kind of struggle in the cockpit. In a mid-season interview, Ricciardo admitted that while the new regulations made the car feel different on the surface, the core behavior was still too familiar. Some of the same traits that gave him headaches in 2021 were still there in 2022. He mentioned that they're finally beginning to understand the root of the issue, though it's still not fully clear whether it's related to the suspension setup, or something else entirely. Even Norris, who's had better results, hasn't found it easy. He's been forced to adjust his driving to suit a car that doesn't behave the way he prefers. He even said it feels like the exact opposite of what works for him, but adapting is part of the job, and that's what he's managed to do, giving him the edge over Ricciardo this season. This contrast between Ricciardo and Norris has been one of the season's clearest storylines. Norris has managed to shift his technique to suit the limitations of the car, even if it doesn't naturally fit his preferences. Ricciardo, however, has always thrived with cars that give him full confidence, machines that respond instantly, and let him take bold risks. That hasn't been the case with McLaren's recent models, and it's shown in his performances. There's a certain driving style Ricciardo favors, one that involves attacking corners, braking late, and throwing the car into tight spaces, but when the car doesn't behave as expected, it forces hesitation. That hesitation has cost him both pace and consistency. The MCL36 simply doesn't allow him to be that driver anymore, and the lack of synergy has been hard to ignore. Offered another tough outing, McLaren put both drivers on the same strategy, yet the results were drastically different. Norris started from 4th and finished 7th, a solid result. Ricciardo started 9th and ended up 15th. Same car, same plan, but wildly different outcomes. After the race, team principal Andreas Seidel was honest about the gap. He acknowledged that while Norris brought home valuable points in their battle with Alpine in the constructors' standings, they needed to understand why Ricciardo fell off during the final stint. On the hard compound tires, Ricciardo's pace dropped significantly, taking him completely out of contention for points. It's not just about a few slow laps or bad luck. It's a consistent theme that's plagued Ricciardo for months now, and while McLaren insists they're working closely with him to fix the problem, the reality is that behind closed doors, they're already making other plans. The move for Oscar Piastri didn't come out of nowhere. It's been building up as the results haven't improved. Behind the scenes, McLaren's strategy appears clear. They're positioning Oscar Piastri as Ricciardo's potential replacement. But there's a complication. Ricciardo still holds a valid contract through the end of 2023, and only he can trigger the early exit clause. This puts McLaren in a tight spot. Now they can't simply remove him without an agreement, reports suggest. Ricciardo is seeking a payout exceeding £12 million to step aside. While the final amount may be negotiated lower, it's evident he would still walk away with a substantial sum if they reach a settlement. That would pave the way for Piastri to team up with Norris for next season. But Ricciardo isn't exactly without options. If he does decide to move on, there are teams that remain interested in signing him. In recent weeks, at least 4 outfits have reportedly reached out to gauge his intentions. One of the most notable among them is Alpine. This adds another layer of drama. Alpine believes it already has a valid contract with Piastri. If that holds up, McLaren may find itself in a legal and financial tangle. And if Piastri ends up staying with Alpine, then Ricciardo's departure becomes even more complicated for McLaren. The irony. Alpine might end up turning to Ricciardo as their fallback plan, the same driver they lost to McLaren not so long ago. Team boss Otmar Szafnauer hasn't ruled it out either. He referenced Fernando Alonso's back-and-forth career moves as an example of how drivers often circle back to previous teams. For Szafnauer, it's less about emotions and more about finding the right fit to support Alpine's goals over the remaining races. As the situation stands, everything now hinges on 2 major factors: whether Ricciardo is willing to step away from McLaren early, and if Alpine can secure legal control over Piastri's services. Both teams are playing a delicate game, each hoping to come out with the driver they believe fits their future. For Alpine, bringing Ricciardo back might seem like a safe move. He's experienced, proven, and familiar with the organization. Even in his current form, he remains a steady driver who can deliver points. But Alpine's leadership is thinking ahead. They're not just searching for someone to fill Alonso's seat. They're building toward a long-term goal. Team principal Szafnauer made it clear. The choice they make has to support their larger vision, a 100-race roadmap aimed at competing for wins and, eventually, championships. There are already several races into that plan. Whoever joins Esteban Ocon must be able to push the team forward, not just hold ground. This raises a crucial question. Is Ricciardo still that driver? The version of him that left Red Bull for Renault was bold, hungry, and consistent. But 2 seasons of challenges at McLaren have left doubts. For Alpine, it would be a calculated risk. On paper, Ricciardo is still one of the better drivers available, but rebuilding his confidence and performance is far from guaranteed. So now, all eyes are on Ricciardo. Does he accept McLaren's terms and look for a fresh start elsewhere? And if so, will Alpine take that gamble and bring him back to the team he once led? The next few weeks could determine the shape of not just one career, but the driver lineup for 2 of Formula One's most competitive teams.